Seapoint. What's the problem that Seapoint is solving at the moment?
We built Seapoint for startup founders. I wanted to build financial tools and platforms so that founders had a better chance of success, being able to manage all of their finances in one place. With AI coming out now, there is just a huge number of problems that can be rethought from first principles and solved in a 10x better way. So we raised a pre-seed of 3 million. AI is such a general purpose, and I use the word magic. It really felt like magic when it came out. Like, how does this thing work, and what can we do with it?
And what would your advice then be to someone, let's say, who's doing computer science in Trinity College? Is it to really get ahead of it, embrace AI, and learn how to work with it?
Oh, I mean, the first mover advantage for becoming AI native is huge. This core skill that you develop as a founder is to be a self-starter.
Is there anything you wish you learned earlier on in your career?
No shame in failing. If you want to do something great in this world, you got to have a lot of shots on goal. Never been a better time to be a founder. There are so many problems that you can rethink and build 10x better solutions. As soon as I moved over to being a founder, I would just get up in the morning and have so much energy.
Yeah.
I was so happy. It just came so naturally. The last couple of years have just been absolutely the happiest and most rewarding of my entire career.
Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you've been in the circuit on quite a few podcasts recently, have you?
I certainly have. It's a busy time. We've got a new business that just launched, so trying to get the message out.
Very good, very good. And I'll jump straight into it then. Seapoint. What's the problem that Seapoint is solving at the moment?
Yeah, so we built Seapoint for startup founders. And I'd previously worked at Stripe for a very long time and was spending a lot of time with founders as like an angel investor. And every founder I spoke to had the same problem where you talk to them about the financial stack they were using to run their business. And they would just have a myriad of different they'd have a legacy bank, like an AIB or a Bank of Ireland, very old software, hard to run a business off of. They would sign up to a new bank like a Revolut and find out that it was really just kind of like a consumer product with a business label. They would go and get cards from a different company. They would have Wise for FX. They would have Stripe for billing. They had everything in a spreadsheet. They tried to throw everything to an accountant so that the accountant would sort it out. But then the accountant would bounce it back to them. They had trouble paying payroll. The whole thing was just very manual, very fragmented. And founders didn't have clarity or control over their finances. And one thing, I realized is that you have a much higher chance of success as a founder if you manage your finances well. You have control over them. You can get, more runway if you manage your finances better. So you have a better chance of success. So that's kind of why I started Seapoint. I wanted to build financial tools, a platform, so that founders had a better chance of success, being able to manage all of their finances in one place.
Okay, very good. And while we're on it, where did the name come from then, Seapoint? Where did the inspiration come from?
There's a joke in technology that naming stuff is one of the hardest problems. And naming a company is always very hard. So I used to go I live in, Monkstown around Blackrock, and used to go for walks around thinking about the name. And I kept passing BlackRock, and obviously that name's taken already. But then the next station in the dark was Seapoint, and I thought, that's a lovely name.
Yeah, it's very fitting, so it all worked out well.
Yeah.
And in terms of then the timing, obviously you've worked for large companies, you've worked for Google, Zalando, Stripe. Why now? Did you just see the problem at this moment in time, or?
So I had kind of had increasingly senior roles at big companies. The last role I had was the CTO of Algolia, which was a kind of multi-billion-dollar growth company. And I had increasingly become aware that the more senior I got, the less close to technology, product, and customers I was becoming. So I was kind of enjoying that less. And also, I just realized that with AI coming out now, there is just a huge number of problems that can be rethought from first principles and solved in a 10x better way. And, I thought, if I'm going to be a founder, and I had 3 startups in my 20s, so I've always considered myself a founder who's relapsed into big corporate world.
Yeah.
That now is the perfect time to be a founder, right? And I had gotten so excited working with other founders as an angel investor, and I had this idea. I spoke to 50 founders, right, before deciding to launch Seapoint. And it was only after all of those conversations that I had a conviction that there was a problem and a pain point here that was so critical that we could make a difference, particularly given my background in AI and finance, that, the time was right. The problem was, acute and compelling enough. And so I thought now's the time to go back.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So then, if it's startup number four, did you find that the time between idea and execution was a lot quicker?
Everything's been faster this time.
Yeah,
So my first three startups were in the 2000s, kind of bookend between the dot-com crash and the great financial crash. And the world was very different back then as a founder. There was very little venture capital. There were no accelerators, very little funding. Support for founders was minimal. It wasn't even cool to be a founder back then. After the dot-com crash, no one wanted to be an entrepreneur. The whole environment's totally different now. And my experience has been, that as someone who's had a career in big tech, I was able to get both the idea off the ground, attract talent. So we've hired a lot of people from Stripe, where I built that team up in Europe. So we've all worked together before. So the talent thing was a lot easier, being a little bit older. And then also I realized is that, capital is available at a much earlier stage in the journey.
yeah,
So we raised a pre-seed of 3 million. And at the time it was like me and a kind of Google Doc with an idea down, right? We didn't have a working product. We didn't have customers. And it's just like amazing that there's so much early stage capital willing to back people. Before you'd have to grind it out for a couple of years and really show traction, customers and stuff before institutional capital would start to come to fund the idea.
yeah. No, there's definitely yeah, easier access to capital these days. Do you find when you're pitching to venture capital firms, is there one thing that they're really looking for?
Yeah, at the earliest stages, it's all about the team.
Yeah,
And most companies go through a number of pivots because they learn so much as they're building the product. They learn so much as they start to work with real customers that the idea that they originally pitched to an investor will change and morph dramatically. And so, investors aren't necessarily looking at the specific solution that you have, but what they're looking at is the team and saying, is this a team of, an exceptional founder with a unique insight and background, going after a big market? And if so, I'm pretty sure that if I back that person, they will figure it out, right? With all the kind of like swings and roundabouts that come with early stage product development.
yeah. And do you find, obviously, you love being a founder,
Yes.
and then you're solving problems for founders? How rewarding is that speaking to founders each and every day?
Well, firstly, like when you're building a startup, having a deep sense for the customer problem by experiencing yourself is really, really valuable. And as we were getting Seapoint off the ground, we went through all of the pain that founders are having financially as well. Even just getting a simple AIB bank account ended up taking us 3 months and a huge amount of paperwork, a huge amount of into branches. Even just getting internet access to that account was crazy. And they had no understanding of what a startup was. I remember the guy at the branch says to me, he goes, how many employees do you have? And I'm like, none. He says, how much revenue do you have? None. How many you have no customers? I'm like, I have no customers. And he said to me, and he really earnestly, he goes, you don't mind me asking, but why would anyone give you $3 million in capital if you don't have any customers? And it was just like their whole mental model about a startup is just kind of, to them, it's like, this has got to be sketchy, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, exactly. I know from experience, yeah, not to diss AIB, but even things like statements and paper and changing address and
Yeah.
having to
How
send a
many
letter, and you're just like,
how many of
this
those
is
little calculators do you have hanging around in your pocket?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The card reader. Those are
Exactly.
the days. But take me back then to some of your earlier startups. So you started, was it developing, was it mobile apps?
Mobile, yeah. I remember when like the mobile phones first came out, it was just like it was magic. It's like this is just crazy. And what can we do with them? I was an engineer. I took the mobile phones apart. I tried to program them, tried to figure out what I could do with them. And I had my first startup at university, which I think is a great time for anyone to think about founding. And when we left university, it was just after the dot-com crash, and the first phones came out where you could actually download and install an app. And everyone who's my age will remember Snake was the
Yeah,
original bit
yeah.
phone. So we had a simple idea, which is what if you could install more games on this? And so we built out a mobile gaming studio. This was 2001, and they had the first kind of color screens, the first installable games, and our mistake was like the vision was absolutely correct, but we were 7 years before the iPhone. There was no marketplace. There was no distribution. There were maybe like 50,000 people who had a phone that you could install this on.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was no way to charge customers. Like there were all of these kind of distribution and marketplace bottlenecks that weren't in place. The infrastructure wasn't there.
yeah.
And so it was very difficult getting that off the ground.
Oh, okay, okay. Then along comes the App Store. When you look at phones, the iPhone, when you look at the internet, and now obviously the buzzword is AI. Do you think AI is as big as when the internet came along? Is that where we're at?
Yeah. I mean, look, every 5 years, there's a platform technology, from the PC to the internet to mobile to social, the cloud, crypto, AI. And it's incredible as an engineer or an innovator, it's like you can rethink all of the world's problems with this new magical capability. And many of the problems can be solved in a 10x better way by leveraging the new technology. And I think AI is such a general purpose. And, I use the word magic. It like really felt like magic when it came out. Like, how does this thing work and what can we do with it? And so I do think that it is going to be one of the biggest technology waves. The speed at which it's been adopted is like insane. Where you had a lot of kind of infrastructure for PCs and the internet that needed to be built out. ChatGPT hit almost, a billion users in the space of less than a year. And that adoption curve is crazy. And people are using it because it has an immense amount of value. So I absolutely think we're going to have another 10 years where everyone is trying to apply AI to all sorts of problems to rethink what the solutions look like.
Yeah. And do you think, in terms of AI, then, is there any kind of negative consequences to it, or anything that you're seeing in your day to day?
Yeah, and every disruptive technology, right, has external effects, right? You can't disrupt something without changing it. And when you change something, there's always going to be short-term disruption, winners and losers. And I don't think AI is any different. But when we look back at, looking back in time and seeing how the world has changed from the PC to the internet to mobile, etc., I think what we can see is the economy as a whole has like expanded massively because of these type of productive technologies. Living standards have increased substantially, and I think in overall, it's been hugely beneficial to the world. I'm a very big technology optimist. And AI, one of the misconceptions is that, I think AI can have a huge benefit, particularly for lower income people as well, who suddenly have access to healthcare, right? And I use ChatGPT all the time. That's, instead of going to see a GP or something, or legal advice or financial advice, and things that, used to be very expensive or hard to access are now universally available to people. And the thing about AI that everyone's scared of, I think, is that people are seeing the most disruption in the most ambiguous knowledge economy roles. So, like lawyers or accountants and roles like this that used to seem to be extremely secure, people now feel a little bit less secure about. But actually, these are the most adaptable people in our economy, right? Whereas globalization may have like changed a lot of the manufacturing and kind of more low skill labor work. AI is definitely going to disrupt much more the high end knowledge worker economy, but they are absolutely adaptable. And you think about the number of people that that have studied law or accounting or business or any of these types of degrees, most of them pivot into roles where they're not practicing. So I think that the adaptability of the workforce that's going to be disrupted is going to be incredibly high. And it's going to lead to, I think, people reaching places and doing activities and jobs in ways that are much faster and less kind of overall disruptive than previous waves.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what would your advice then be to someone, let's say, who's doing computer science in Trinity College? Is it to really get ahead of it, embrace AI, and learn how to work with it?
Oh, I mean, the first mover advantage for becoming AI native is huge. And so, no matter what profession you're in, like the great thing about AI is it has human languages and input and output, which means that everyone can actually benefit from it. And so I think every single role, what I'd encourage people to do is to just start building and experimenting and trying stuff. So look back at the last 2 weeks, all of the work that you've done. What's the stuff that's the least valuable, most boring, most repetitive, time consuming? And then sit down and try to experiment and figure out, could I automate it? How would it work? Sit down with the AI and ask it, explain it to you how to fix things, and just try to build. Have your own personal little hackathons where you're now a builder and trying to automate stuff.
Yeah.
It's the best way to learn.
Yeah, no, 100%. What about older software engineers, who've been around since the days of COBOL and C++, who aren't as willing to embrace AI? Do you think they
Yeah.
get left behind?
No, I think what you have to do is like reframe the problem. So a lot of folks have spent a long time becoming a master craftsman of writing code.
Yeah.
And when you look at any kind of like career trajectory, you start off as a junior developer, you're writing code, become a senior engineer, maybe writing a little bit less code, a little bit more mentoring junior people, a little bit more figuring out architecture and bigger process things about building software. You become a staff engineer or a manager, and suddenly, you're not writing code anymore. And so the way I described it to a lot of our engineers is, imagine if I asked you to become, you'd say you're a phenomenal engineer. I want you to become a manager, and you're going to manage a team of agents. And your job is to give them all the context they need to do their job, to monitor the work, review the work and give them feedback, and then train them so the next task you give them, they can complete better. But now you're managing a team of 4 or 5 agents, and to effectively manage agents, you actually have to do many of the similar things you do when you're managing people, like a junior developer. But now, as a single individual contributor, your output is like the output of a team, not the output that's constrained by how much code you can write. And so, if you actually frame it as I'm elevating you to a manager and a leader, and your role is now different, your output is going to go up 4 or 5x, not by handwriting, but by managing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a brilliant outlook. When you look at some roles in technologies, do you think any should be fearful or redundant? Let's say a QA engineer, like with the likes of AI now.
No, I mean, the way I look at it is that every role needs to think about how can I manage like teams of agents to get far more done. And every software company I've worked at, the bottleneck has always been the availability of people to build product. I've never worked in a software company where it's like, hey guys, the roadmap's done. We're finished. We're out of ideas. Like,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
And so everywhere there's always just been, 10 times as many ideas of what we could build and how we could add value. And it's always been constrained by engineering, product design, etc. Those constraints are no longer like the main constraint. When you adopt AI as part of the software development cycle, and you still need people who have taste in design. You still need people who can understand customer problems and synthesize solutions. You still need a lot of craft in the quality of the product. And all of those roles still need to be human supervised and directed.
Yeah, no, perfect. And in terms of yourself, then getting into technology, what started it? Was it a computer at home? Was it
Yeah.
someone in the family?
So my dad came home with a PC one day when I was about 10 years old, and it was like this magic box. I was like, what the hell is this thing? How does it work? I started to play a couple games on it, and I remember like a lot of kids when they play games, the first thing is they're like, I just want to play more games, I want to install more games. For me, I was just like, I got to know how this thing works. Like, I want to understand what's behind it. And so back in those days, you just take the computer apart, you could start pulling out the hard drive, learning all about it. I started writing code, and through my teenage years, I was really obsessed with software engineering. And my family teased me a lot because when I was like 15, I read Bill Gates's biography.
Oh, yeah, yeah, very
And Bill
good.
Gates was the first computer engineer turned like business person, um, whose like engineering creation is used by hundreds of millions of people around the world. But he was running the business, and that was one of the moments where I'm like, as a computer engineer, maybe I can do more than just software. Maybe I can actually like start a business.
Yeah.
So I had a picture of Bill Gates on my wall when I was a teenager. My friends had footballers and girls on the wall. I had Bill Gates up
Bill
there.
Gates, very good. Very good. And in terms of then working as a startup founder, working in large tech, how did being a founder help you in those large technology companies, especially the likes of Google or
Yeah.
the likes of Stripe?
And this is what I tell a lot of people who are in a big tech company about being a founder and taking a diversion to trying to be founder. I was far more effective in big companies because I had the founder mindset. And I joined Google back in 2011, where it was chaotic and on fire. And I turned up and there were just so many problems to solve. And it was an environment encouraged what I call high agency, which is there was no asking for permission to fix stuff. You just went and did it. And this core skill that you develop as a founder is to be a self starter. You're not waiting for people to ask you to do stuff. You are able to just look around and figure out stack ranking, what's the most important things, the biggest problems, and go and fix them. And so this high agency mindset gives you a big advantage when you're a big company because a lot of people in big companies are lower agency. They're waiting to be told what to do, looking for direction. What's my task? What am my goal for this quarter? Okay, great, I'll go and do it. But the best people who really shine in big companies are the ones who do things that no one asked them to do. And they've figured it out on their own and they've gone and done it. And they come back and they show the results.
Yeah. And then I guess in terms of on the flip side, you've gone from large tech to being a founder again. Does that help you in terms of building high performance teams? Well, obviously getting some from Stripe always helps,
Yeah,
but
it does.
yeah,
I mean, look, one of the hardest parts about building a tech company is hiring the right team. And, you could kind of say like 80% of the problem is if you get the best people and the right people, you put them into a team, they're high agency. That's the hardest bit. Once you have a great team in place, my goal in life is to be like the least important person.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because, last summer I went on a holiday for 2 weeks. And it was amazing because the team that I'd hired had such high agency that they didn't need me for anything. I wasn't a bottleneck. I wasn't part of the decision process. And I got great joy watching them all run the business while I was on holiday. And to me, there's a lot of founders and managers who feel like the opposite. They have a certain level of insecurity, which makes them want to be the bottleneck and decision maker on everything, where, they want to go and micromanage and get into the weeds, and no one can act without their approval. So I'm very much the opposite. I think, the greatness and the success of Seapoint will be in the agency of the team that I've built and how they make decisions every day and every week without me being there.
yeah. Now, obviously, that sounds like the right way to go. Was it difficult to get to that point, though? Was there a part of you in the past who found it difficult to kind of hand over the reins, or not hand over the reins, but kind of lose that sense of control at times?
So like my journey into leadership was quite a abrupt one. I joined Zalando, and when I was at Google, I was basically an individual contributor, a senior one, but at times I'd had two or three people I'd manage. And when I joined Zalando, I joined as a VP of engineering, and I had 150 people reporting to me, and it was just such a huge leap. Like most people kind of have a linear, like here's 5, here's 10, here's 20, here's 50, right? And the first 6 months of trying to lead a team of that size, I made all of the mistakes you can imagine. Being an individual contributor is a very different set of skills, leading people. And at the end of the 6 months, I got my first 360-degree feedback review, and it was brutal. Like people
Yeah,
were just like, when you're an individual contributor, you want to have the answers to all of the problems. And so I spent my first 6 months wandering around saying, I've got a better idea than you. You're doing this wrong. You should do it this way. Hey, what is that? No, you've got to go and do this. I'm just trying to show people that I had all the answers and I was smarter than them, which is quite effective when you're an individual contributor because your job is to solve problems really well.
yeah,
But
exactly.
you can just imagine how much my team loved that style of leadership.
Mm,
And I'm very fortunate that they really directly, candidly, and honestly told me.
yeah, yeah. Or
So
else,
I had to figure out like, oh, okay, well, what is the role of someone who's leading at the scale? And it's definitely not the same thing as being the individual contributor.
and do you find that obviously there is a trend, but I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush, but are the best engineers usually not the greatest leaders, or is it kind of
Yeah,
few and far between?
I think that there is a prerequisite to be a great engineer, to be a great engineering leader. I think it's very hard to do it unless you've actually, practiced the craft and can actually coach, mentor, and communicate with folks who are practicing the craft of engineering. But it's definitely not sufficient to be a great manager, because you have to be really adaptable from an emotional intelligence perspective. Because the larger organizations you lead, the less connected you are to every individual there. And the skills that make you good at leading larger organizations are absolutely not the skills that made you a great individual engineer. So your adaptability and ability to kind of want to change and think about how you manage has to be different. And honestly, like I got to the point where I was the CTO of this company, Algolia, and I was just sitting there going, I'm spending all of my time doing reorganizations, which are very painful, performance reviews, doing like dealing with executive dysfunction, reporting to the exec team, collaborating with others. I'm like, I'm not doing any building anymore. I'm not out with customers. I'm not thinking about product. I'm doing the internal bureaucratic thing about running a large organization. And I didn't enjoy it. It was emotionally draining. I actually found it kind of boring. If that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
not intellectually that stimulating.
Yeah.
And I realized that if I wasn't excited about it and wasn't giving me energy, I probably wasn't doing a great job
Yeah.
as someone who really that was their, you know, passion in life.
Yeah.
And as soon as I moved over to being a founder, I would just get up in the morning and have so much energy.
Yeah.
I was so happy. It just came so naturally. I just loved being a founder. The last couple of years have just been absolutely the happiest and most rewarding of my entire career.
Brilliant, brilliant. And do you find when you wake up, there's a part of you saying, right, I get to build something today? Or do you love the
Yes,
speaking to customers and founders more? Or is it,
it's a great mix of both.
yeah, okay.
And the great thing about being back as a founder is, I think, being a founder who's an engineer, there's so much that you need to like discover what is possible right now. Everything is changing 3 to 6 months. And a lot of the stuff that I enjoy doing is trying to prototype and discover what is actually possible now. And stuff that wasn't possible 3 months ago, a new model comes out, a new framework comes out, you're like, let's try this again. And so I do a lot of like technical discovery work and then try to move that into the team as well. And then I have months like the last 3 months, we've only been doing kind of founder led sales. So I've just been talking to 5 customers a day, and I get to meet so many amazing exciting founders who are building incredible products. But I enjoy it. I look forward to it. Yeah.
Gets you excited. In terms of you were talking about in big companies, how, yeah, maybe sometimes the best engineer is not the best leader. Do you find that's reflected in startups? Just the best startup founder, technical founder at startup phase might not be the best when it comes to scaling the company and putting structures and process in place.
Um, yeah, I think it'd be true. I mean, I've worked in companies where the founder has been technical, like at Stripe, and I've been in a technical role, and so you'd think like that would be a good match. And then I've worked at companies where leadership was very much commercial, sales related, and they're very different situations. And in many ways, it's great to have a leader of the company that shares the same kind of skill set as you do. But on the other hand, they're highly opinionated about the how you should do things.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Whereas if they have the opposite skill set, they know that they don't know how to do what you're doing, so they give you more leeway in the how. But often they don't know how to set their expectations correctly, and they will have expectations that are unrealistic. And so it's a very interesting dynamic about that kind of combination.
Yeah. And as well as, I guess, speaking to founders, you've obviously sat on a couple of boards, angel invested.
Yes.
Um, how rewarding is that?
So the angel investing in the board stuff, I kind of felt like it was trying to make up for the corporate job that I wasn't maybe enjoying as much.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I loved being in the corporate job, but doing the angel investing. I remember, I would have a really long day in the corporate job that is described as sometimes stressful and boring,
yeah,
but it would be energy draining. And I'd be tired. And I would then go and meet a founder, spend 30 minutes with him listening about the business he's building and his vision for the future. And I come away from that 30 minutes filled with energy. And same with like working with startup founders on the board and mentoring them. And that is really one of the reasons why I've done Seapoint, because I wanted to follow that energy.
yeah,
And when you're spending so much time with customers that you love spending time with, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the green thread and kind of the red thread. Obviously, the red thread is the monotonous task you may not enjoy, whereas the green is like
Yeah.
what you just mentioned there, what gets you excited. And
Yeah.
if AI can look after the red thread, and obviously you can have your own company and kind of be on that startup journey, then that's what's going to keep you, yeah, waking up every.
Because it's a long journey being a founder and it requires a lot of resilience. And if you don't have something that you genuinely are so passionate about and you know have the determination to do, it's going to be tough to stick with it and see it through.
Yeah, no, exactly. Obviously chatting to you and knowing you. You sat on the board, was it Bank of England, is it?
Yeah. So when I was at Stripe, I became pretty interested and deep into crypto.
Okay, yes.
As an engineer, I think crypto as a technology is absolutely fascinating. And so I was relatively early in terms of looking at the new kind of programmable money and at Stripe thinking about how we could apply this to payments more broadly in the economy. And so I got the opportunity to join the Bank of England and the ECB at the same time. We're setting up kind of working groups with industry to figure out how they could leverage crypto to have central bank digital currencies. And so there were a couple of dozen of us on each of these groups from different parts of industry. And yeah, it was like a really fascinating experience to see like what we could do. Now, I will say this was maybe, I'm going to say 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And like all kind of government committees, here we are 5 years later, and there is no product that
Yeah.
is out. No one can use the CDBC, and I think we're pretty far away. And I'm sure these committees will continue to operate for another 5 years, and we'll see whether something ships out of them.
Yeah, yeah, it can be slow moving. Obviously, we know how much of a game changer blockchain technology is, but in terms of cryptocurrencies themselves, do you think we'll get to a point where you'll be going to the pub or going to the shop and actually using
Yeah.
cryptocurrency to pay for things?
So I think crypto has been one of these like extraordinary technologies from an engineering perspective. This idea of a global distributed ledger that's not like regulated by any government. I mean, I think it's a phenomenal idea. But it's been around since like 2013. There have been hundreds of billions of dollars invested in it. There have been thousands and thousands of startups who've experimented with trying to solve, the world's problems with crypto. And here we are now in 2026, and I don't think you and I have interacted with a product today that is powered by crypto. And one of the reasons is that crypto was a technology where, from a user's perspective, going and paying for a coffee in my local shop, right, with tapping my phone, there's not a 10x better experience if you're going to pay with crypto, right? And unless you have some kind of like 5 or 10x better experience, there's no reason for users to move to a crypto payment system. There's no reason for a merchant to move. And this is true in developed economies. But I actually think where crypto may end up finding its best market fit after 15 years is in international finance, moving money globally, particularly in developing markets where the financial infrastructure is not as developed and maybe the local currency is not as stable, and where getting access to US dollars and being able to transact US dollars internationally may be an enormous 10x better experience if you're in South America or Asia or Africa. And obviously, like global remittance, I think there's a great use case. But honestly, we live in a society now where the financial infrastructure is really good in Europe. And there's not a 10x better version of it with crypto.
Mm. Yeah. Obviously, you've said 10x better experience there. Is that the way? That's a great outlook, actually. Is that the way you look at even building products, building companies? Like, that's how much you have to improve things for it
Yeah.
to be worth doing.
So I worked in Google's research lab, the lab that had self-driving cars and Google Glass. I was one of the founding members of the drone delivery team there.
Oh, very good.
And the whole idea of this lab was like trying to find transformational technologies that were 10x better. And that's really where I kind of like got this bar for what innovation really is, because honestly, there is, users have so much inertia when it comes to change. And if, I said to you, I've got a product that I'd like you to use, it's 10% better than the previous product, right? across the whole economy, that's 10% is an amazing outcome. But you're not going to go through the friction and pain of changing for 10%.
Yeah.
And so when you want to buid a new product as a founder, as a established company, you really have to have something that is so substantially better that users get over that inertia and pain threshold to go and change. And a great example is like ChatGPT,
Yeah.
like a billion users over the course of like 6 or 12 months.
Mhm.
Clearly, that product is 10 times better than going to Google, typing 4 words, and then clicking on 10 links. And so, yeah, I think kind of 5 to 10 times better is the bar you want to aim for.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. Sorry for going off on tangents myself here,
No.
but you mentioned drone delivery. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about that at the moment. Do you think that's 10x better experience? Are you gonna order a burger and have it delivered by
Oh,
drone?
absolutely.
Yeah,
So when you think about the axis of like proving things,
yeah,
it's always pretty safe to bet on something being faster, right? So if you've got to wait for 45 minutes to an hour to get, dinner, and you could get it in 4 or 5 minutes, right? You're clearly going to pay for the thing that takes 4 or 5 minutes. If it increases the choice of places that you can get delivery from because the range is much faster,
yeah,
right? If it's going to be even cheaper than having, a human in a car driving around a neighborhood, it's going to be cleaner. Like all of these things, I think it's very clear that humans react to well, cheaper, faster, better quality, better choice.
mm, yeah, no, definitely. Do you think it could be applied to outside? I just mentioned food delivery, but like in terms of, I guess, anything, healthcare, medical injuries, whatever it may be. Do you think drone could be used for that?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. And I think there are second or third order effects. Like when we were coming up with this at Google X, the idea was, what if you could get access to anything instantly? How would it kind of change the way you think about things? You would probably have a lot less stuff at home, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You wouldn't have to like hoard things in case that you needed
yeah.
them one day.
The attic can be clear.
Yeah. It also meant like imagine you could get access to high quality, healthy food that had, a economy of scale in manufacturing and therefore a price that was significantly less. And it would be transformational if like every time you were hungry, you could click your fingers and get access to like a really healthy, wonderful food, and you wouldn't have to like hoard all this food and that goes rotten in your
Yeah,
kitchen,
that clear out you do at the
you
end of
know,
every week. Yeah.
or every night be over the stove, right? And so I think the second, third order effects would be incredible if we had instant access to anything like this.
Do you find, looking back at your career, is there anything you wish you learned earlier on in your career?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, I think if you talk to anyone, if they can't honestly tell you about their 10 or 20 failures, then they've not been pushing the boat out
Yeah.
hard enough. And so there have been plenty of failures. The thing I probably wish I knew earlier in my career is that there's absolutely no shame in failure. I think by the third startup, I ended up running that for 4 years. But in all honesty, I probably knew 18 months in it wasn't working. And instead of shutting it down and getting, 2.5 years of my life back that I could have been doing something else, I felt that there was shame in shutting it down. There were investors counting on us, employees, and just kind of like tried to grind through it, even though I knew subconsciously it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And so, not having those 2 years is the thing that really I regret the most.
Okay.
And that's what I say to founders, like there's no shame in failing. Like
Yeah.
if you want to do something great in this world, you got to have a lot of shots on goal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And probably fail fast as well, as you
Yeah, the
say,
faster
rather.
you fail, the faster you can try that. You can take the learning and try the next thing.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do in life is fail slowly.
Yeah. That's it. Exactly. As you said, kind of rather than holding on to it. And it's probably pride as well.
Yes.
Too. I was going to ask you what keeps you up at night, but would it be that, what you just mentioned?
Oh, what keeps me up at night? Making sure every customer uses Seapoint is successful.
Yeah. Okay.
It is really the only thing when you're building a product is making sure your customers love the product.
Okay. Okay. And tell us a little bit about the most recent funding. So 7.5 million in funding.
Yeah, we just closed the round. We just announced a couple of weeks ago, Seapoint. We were in private beta for the first year, and I was really obsessed that we needed to make every customer in our private beta cohort successful. And they gave us tons and tons of feedback. We've iterated a lot. We've added more and more features. And we finally got to the stage last month where we felt confident that if we were to bring on a lot more customers, that they would also be successful in the product. So we announced the fundraising round, but the really big news is that anyone can sign up at seapoint.co and come and use our product.
Very good.
Any founders in the UK or Ireland.
Yeah. Very good. Do you find is it difficult to keep the guardrails up when you build a product, not to customize it or add too many features for a particular customer to keep them happy, but to
Yeah.
actually build something that you can scale?
Yeah, and that's where I think a lot of taste comes into it. And as a founder myself, I can really like empathize with what other founders are doing, and therefore make some of the hard choices about what to build and what not to build, and the order to build it. And so, yeah, we have a huge backlog of customer feedback, and figuring out, which features to do in what order is part of you know, the craft of building.
Yeah. Very good. And in terms of what the next 3 years looks like for a C Point.
Um, so, our whole mission is that we want to help businesses be more successful and succeed at a higher rate, scale at a faster rate. We're starting with startup founders in the UK and Ireland, but really the market for what we're building is anyone who is operating a company with, say, more than 5 employees,
Mm.
right, up to 250.
Yeah.
And I call this the mid market. These are folks who are owner operators of businesses. They don't have a big finance team. They don't have the need for ERP systems and SAP and stuff like this. But they need to run their business, and there's no category leading finance software product that is the one place that they can run their finances. And this group is a third of Europe's economy and employs like a third of everyone in Europe. It's incredible how big it is.
Mm.
And there's no clear, solution for how they can run financial operations.
Mm. And where are the majority of the customers now? Is it Irish, UK,
Yeah.
Europe?
We started with the Ireland and the UK.
Yeah.
We've started with VC-backed founders, pre-seed to Series A. But one of the things that's been most satisfying is when we launched a few weeks ago, we've had a huge number of folks who are signing up and using Seapoint who aren't VC-backed founders. So, on Sunday we had a restaurant up in Meath signed up,
Oh, very good.
and they've got a few $100,000 in their bank account. They're using Bank of Ireland, and now they've got all their accounting software, their email, everything connected, and they're starting to use our product to run their business. But we've had creches, we've had gyms, we've had all sorts of folks who've signed up. And that's one of the beauties of having a kind of self-serve product. We were originally solving for startup founders, and it turns out that I think there's a huge group of people who are not building technology, but who identify as a startup founder as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's very exciting. And yeah, not to focus too much on legacy banks, but obviously there are issues there. And then you see disruptors like Revolut or Monzo come to the market. What do you think these banks, legacy banks, need to do better?
Look, I mean, they're in a very difficult position because I think they've spent decades dealing with legacy technology. I think they are not run or led by technology or product people. They're run by people who understand the banking industry, and particularly the risk management around taking deposits and then lending those deposits out. It has never been a technology first business. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of the banks underinvested in technology for a very large period of times because they saw it as a cost center. And there was an opportunity to not invest in technology to keep your margins higher. And I think the bigger problem with banking is there's a lack of competition. In Ireland, you have two banks that have 80–90% of the market. And so there's not a lot of incentive for them to compete on innovation.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, it's good to see obviously companies like Revolut come in and obviously disrupt that. And I know I've moved to that.
Yeah.
What about For listeners, I ask every guest this: is there a book that you've read that you think everyone should read?
Yeah. It's a bit of a nerdy book, but the biggest kind of pivotal moment in leadership is when my boss at Zalando at the time recommended I read a book called Thinking in Systems. And he says to me, every management problem and leadership problem can be broken down into a systems problem. You think of any organization and even a startup. I have a systems diagram of Seapoint that I communicate every single offsite to the team. And any complex organization can be broken down into a series of systems, and you can measure each part of the system, and you can understand where the bottlenecks are, and you can go about fixing them. And he said, your job as a leader is to be the architect of the system, which is the organization you're running.
Okay, so that obviously taught you quite a lot.
Yes.
What advice would you give to, I guess, first-time founders who are starting a technology company in this day and age?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's never been a better time to be a founder. Not only because there are so many problems that you can rethink and build 10x better solutions with. So I think that the surface area of problems that can be tackled is immense right now. But also the way that you build a company is totally different now because of AI. And the speed at which we've been able to operate is just been incredible. Building software in an AI native way, running every part of the business AI native from day one. I think the great opportunity is, can we build a large business where, we're at 20 people right now.
Yeah.
Traditionally, you just keep hiring lots of people as the company grew because in order to do more output, you just needed more humans. But as organizations grow larger and larger, their speed and complexity, right, just everything starts to slow down. This is the natural force. No one has been able to solve this problem in hundreds of years of leadership, right? It's inevitable. The way that I'm looking at this is that I could see Seapoint, instead of a 100-person human organization, I imagine we might have 30 or 40 humans managing 100 agents. And that the automation of so many of these tasks means that you can move just as fast as an organization of 100 plus people, but faster than a 100 plus person with a smaller group. And so it requires less capital, and the speed advantage compounds to a competitive advantage.
Yeah, yeah. As you say, there's never been a more exciting time or probably easier time to be a founder.
100%. And one of the bets that we have at Seapoint is that there's going to be an explosion of entrepreneurship over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful thing for the economy and for consumers everywhere, that we have more competition, more products to choose from.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it is very promising and plenty of opportunity out there. So an exciting time. But we'll leave it on that. And I think any founder who's listening to this will obviously gain a lot of insight from the chat. So Sean, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. I look forward to seeing the continued success of Seapoint.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.